Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Luke Goetting. Luke is a renowned future of work expert and founder of Puffingston Presentations. Luke has an exceptional track record of helping organizations unlock the potential of Gen Z in the workplace. In today's episode, we'll explore the future of work, focusing on what companies need to do to prepare for hiring and engaging Gen Z talent. Hi, Luke. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you so much for having me, Sonia.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So my first job out of college was in outside sales. I found pretty quickly. So I was traveling all over the Midwest. I'm originally from Minnesota. And I was traveling all over the Midwest, meeting with our dealer network. We were a manufacturer. And going to their offices and connecting with them on a pretty regular basis. I was traveling up to 75, 80% at that time. And I quickly found that my slide deck was like the top asset that I used in my career because I was paid on commission largely. So I got really interested in presentation dynamics and meeting dynamics. Got really interested in Prezi, which Sonia, did you ever use Prezi? Do you remember that one at all?
I don't.
Okay, no worries. It was kind of like, it was a cloud-based PowerPoint that had kind of some zooming in and out functionality. It was like the cool PowerPoint for a period. It still does exist, but it was especially hot in the mid 2010s. And so I got really interested in that tool. Got so interested that I quit my job after about 4 years, started consulting with people that I thought could use that for their own organizations. And it was kind of puttering along. My first 6 months did not go as great as I had hoped. But about 6 months in, one of my presentations won the Best Business Prezi of the Year award.
Oh, wow.
And that really was a catapulting event. I got a lot of press from that. I got featured on Prezi's website. I eventually became a certified Prezi expert and started getting clients and leads from all over the country, sometimes the world. Formed a really close relationship with that software company themselves. Went to Budapest, Hungary 4 times to meet with their teams and to meet with fellow experts around the world. So yeah, it's been 10 years. We work with all kinds of clients, traditionally tech companies who are speaking at big events. So I kind of accidentally, from winning that award, became a presentation agency, a creative agency. And then increasingly over the last 3-4 years, I've been feeling the itch to get back on stages and in front of audiences. I kind of went behind the scenes to work with my clients for many years. But wanted to get back to my roots, so to speak. So for the last 6 months, especially, I've been giving a talk, unleashing the potential of Gen Z. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Have spoken to HR audiences, project management audiences, tech audiences, all around the country. I actually had a talk in Poland recently, and I've got one in Australia in the fall. So it's been well received, and I'm just really excited to share and to be able to practice a little bit of what I preach too. So long-winded, that's a little summary of what I'm all about.
Okay, love it, love it. So today we're going to talk about Gen Z. I have a ton of questions, but before we get there, can you tell us what is considered Gen Z?
Yeah, great question. I found early on when I was giving my talk, I went way too long, and then someone's first question would always be like, okay, what is that? So yeah, I added.
I'd start with that one.
Yeah, it's a great prompt. Gen Z is the generation that came after the millennials, born between 1997 in 2010. So what a lot of people find surprising is that Gen Z is already the oldest Gen Z. They're already 27 years old. So I feel like a lot of us think, oh, that's my new intern. They're probably Gen Z. But no, I mean, they probably are. But like the oldest Gen Z are already increasingly becoming managers. And by next year already, Gen Z will make up 1/4, 1 out of 4 workers in the overall workplace. They've already outpaced the baby boomer generation. So
Wow.
yeah, they are very much here in our companies. They're not coming.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really quite think about that. But anyways, that's a good point. So tell me, why do companies need to strategize for hiring Gen Z talent? And could you share your insights into the key characteristics that define Gen Z in the workplace?
Yes, I'll tackle those one at a time. You might need to remind me of the latter.
Yeah.
But the first answer is really simple. Why? They are the future of the workforce. Like them or not. Hopefully after today's chat you do.
You will.
But it's inevitable. And I point to millennials. Millennials are the top most represented demographic in terms of generations in the workforce right now. That happened really fast. It feels like to me as a millennial, only 5-ish years ago, we were being constantly derided as lazy, entitled, don't want to work. And now all of a sudden, Gen Z or millennials are the most represented and the most sought after employees in many instances. And so this will happen fast. And we've had these underlying trends in the last few years of the great resignation. And now I didn't come up with this phrase, but some are calling this period the great gloom, where people aren't leaving as much, but they're actually getting really down on engagement, kind of depressed because they don't have as many options to seek employment elsewhere. And so if you have turnover, it stands to reason that you're not developing those future leaders if people are leaving every year or two. So
Does that have something to do with my second part of the question, which was, if you could give us some insights into the key characteristics that define a Gen Z? Because it's so funny because we're talking about Gen Z, you're a millennial, and I'm a Gen X.
okay.
So talking about
You get the whole gamut. Yeah.
yeah. So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation because like they're sort of the last ones right now.
Exactly. And in fairness, Gen X, we can blame y'all for raising Gen Z. No, just kidding. But kind of, I mean, technically true, but no blaming to be had here.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do we need to know about this generation? We've all heard the phrase a digital native generation. It flows pretty easily. We skim it in these articles and we keep moving on with our lives. I would stress that there are a significant amount of implications associated with that are going to play a huge role in our organizations going forward in the way that we traditionally do business. So right off the bat, a few things that come to mind for me is that Gen Z is used to having information at its fingertips. From very early ages, they could access iPads and sell their parents' cell phones and look things up. And there's a lot of business traditions where information is very siloed. It's very need to know. And that can be very frustrating for a digital native generation. I also want to stress that has implications in the why behind our work. I really stress to leaders, it's very important to lead with why in this age, especially as it relates to Gen Z. And also millennials share a lot of characteristics of almost the precursors to Gen Z in many ways. So sharing that why, both from a purpose perspective, Gen Z is the highest, as far as generations go, the most resonant with their core values. Like they want to live their values in their job, not just have this kind of distinction between their work life and their home life. So making sure we are stressing this is the greater good of what we are achieving as an organization. It's not just about profits, it's not just about shareholders. This is what we are trying to achieve. Almost a purpose first mission And then again, in many cases, you could argue that profits follow the purpose. So those are some quick hitting things there. One other thing, we can get way more into this, of course, but just the style of communication. It's a very common, they're digital natives, so they're used to asynchronous texting and even video notes that aren't received in real time, as in like a meeting would. They are used to using a more casual language. But the most important thing I stress to people is the frequency. Gen Z is used to quick, bite-sized touch base, if you will. And again, business traditions are much more of, oh, we're going to meet, on a monthly basis, or maybe we'll have an annual review. And that is just so misaligned with a generation that can post something and get feedback from hundreds of people in minutes, hours at the most. And then you have something really important like your job, and you can't get a hold of your manager. You're not getting any guidance on that. It creates a real misalignment. So those are some highlights there. Happy to dive much deeper with you.
Very interesting. I never really thought about that. I mean, I have a couple millennials and obviously Gen Z on my team. So now I'm like, oh crap, maybe I haven't really put a lot of thought into this. But here's the thing I wanted to ask. I do find that this is a bit of a problem, and maybe just because I am a Gen X and sort of old school. So I find that the younger generation, whether it's millennial or Gen Z, they tend to want to move up into like a manager position a lot faster than like a Gen X, because Gen X, we come from the I guess process understanding that you have to do certain roles, learn those roles, learn all of the managerial aspect of it in order to get into that space. I find that the younger generation, they're like, well, I've been here a year or two. It's time to take that jump. And my concern with it is always, great. Yeah, you've been here 2 years. You do your job really well, but now you have to manage people and you're not ready for that yet, and they have a hard time understanding that. And so they'll go elsewhere, and I'll get a phone call from the company that they've gone to saying, hey, we want to do a check on this person, and they're saying that they were a manager of this department. And I'm like, they were in that department but they weren't a manager, because they're trying to move up without doing that work. I know that's like a long-winded comment, but how do you what advice do you have for uh, managers, business owners that are dealing with those situations? How do you go about it and overcoming that?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. And I want to affirm your premise here in that, and stress to our listeners, Gen Z is analyzing and assessing their career and opportunities at a very micro level. I have my own podcast, Gen Z at Work, and I interviewed my cousin who's Gen Z, and we were talking about he's actually started his own company, but he worked 3-4 years in the workplace prior. But the way he talked about his career, those 3 or 4 years, it sounded like he had been decades in the workforce. And so I really want to stress that they are analyzing the opportunities and their growth potential at practically if not quarterly, sometimes monthly basis. There's
Okay.
not that spirit of, oh, I'll knock out 2, 3, 4 years here and kind of see what's up after that. And again, I key in on the digital native psychology. They're used to seeing progress. They're used to seeing indicators. They're used to seeing notifications. They're used to having levels and badges. These are all psychological functions built into a digital experience.
Yeah.
And so the advice I would share with you and anyone who's struggling with this, I think many times, and almost everything I'm saying, I'm guilty of. I became an accidental manager for my agency. So no blame from my end. But I think a lot of times as managers, as leaders, we do a poor job of sharing the vision for those employees.
Mm.
What do you get out of staying here another 6 months, another year? What are the skills I will work with you on to get you to be in that management potential? And here's roughly how long I think it will take. And we're going to have constant checkpoints along the way. I talk about gamification, Sonia, quite a bit. Like one of the traps, and all of us from all generations have felt this, I think, you get plopped in a role and you just feel like, man, it's been 3 years. I'm not learning anything.
Mm.
Um, and maybe someday I'll get considered for a promotion. But if we as managers, leaders can really stress, like, here's what our vision is, here's the incentive for you to stay. Like, we're working to getting you somewhere great. And of course, make sure to align with your employees. Don't just create that roadmap without their input. But I think, again, so many times we have that in our head, but we don't share that very well with our teams. And that means they're just assuming, well, I've learned everything I can from this and I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I understand. I hired someone right out of school one time, and they graduated, came and worked on my team, and within like the first 2 months, they were already making comments to, the rest of the team that it's like, oh, I'm like way more experienced than this, and I'm not gonna be here very long. And I'm like, okay, like we did do that. We set up a plan for here's where you're gonna be in the next 6 months if you stay, and here's the potential of growth. But the mindset is even like even more micro than what I even expected. They're literally like analyzing every single little thing. But I also think that maybe I'm wrong. Um, like, are they, if they take a jump so quickly, are they going to miss out on the things that they should be learning in between, that they should be taking a little bit more time? Like, for example, one of the fears that I have is if I'm going to promote someone to become a manager or a director that doesn't have enough experience or hasn't gone through the processes that takes time to get there, I might have an HR nightmare on my hand because they don't know how to deal with people. They don't know how to speak to people. They're going to deal with people. They're they're going to manage them in the way they would manage themselves, and not everybody likes that. Maybe they're going to be micromanagers. So now, am I going to create an HR nightmare for myself?
It's a great, well, first of all, I'll just answer your question directly, which is yes, there's a real risk that they won't have learned and that they are missing out on opportunities.
Yeah.
But again, I really want to stress it's our job to really make that case as clear as possible and outline. Sometimes our roadmaps, I'm not accusing you of this, but like sometimes our roadmaps are really much more penalty driven. Like, here's what you have to do. I'm thinking kind of classic sales, especially. It's like, here's your quotas you have to hit. If you do great, you check that box. If not, like, we're going to have a serious talk versus like incentive based. Like, this is where you're going to go. This is why it's going to be amazing for you to get there. This is why it makes sense for you to stay here.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on the psychology here because again, what I have found as I've really gotten to know Gen Z closely through my speaking and my consulting is that most of the things that we learn from them, like it makes sense. There's a rational explanation. And with Gen Z, especially, they came to the workplace at a time of pretty good economic situations, and they're extremely interconnected. But prior to the pandemic, like the economy was running pretty strongly without much disruption. So one, they had a bevy of options, but also they are so interconnected, especially via social media. They see their colleagues who leave get pay raises, get better titles. People who stick around actually oftentimes are worse off than those people who job hopped every year or two. I mean, it's especially in tech, like the data is extremely clear on that.
Yeah.
There is a very clear economic case that you should, if the market's good, be changing your jobs every year, 2, 3. I don't want to paint this as a doomsday scenario, but I really want to stress this is why creating those outlines, but also really making sure there is something about your company that makes it not just another company to work with, let alone there's a million gig economy options. There's so many options. So So there
Yeah.
must be something, there must be a greater purpose. There must be a why for them to be there because everything, I hate to break it to y'all, and I know many of y'all have experienced this, like it's tough because we're working against a true economic consideration that someone should be leaving frequently.
Yeah. So, in your experience, what are the most effective tactics? And I know you've talked about it a little bit, but I want to go in more detail. What are your most effective tactics for attracting Gen Z talent to an organization? And how do these differ from strategies used by previous generations?
Yes. So I think leaning into one thing Gen Z is very savvy about, having grown up with, I think we've hit on a theme here, digital natives, is that they're used to sniffing out inauthenticity online. And so you have these kind of, when you think about recruiting, you think about job listings and you think about write-ups like that.
Mhm.
It's who wants to read through those things? One, they're pretty boilerplate. Most of them look and feel very similar. Two, sometimes even when you do kind of get silly with the language, it feels a little bit off-putting. Three, it can be very much a lie. It's just written by a recruiting firm, it's written by HR, not the HR, and I'm not accusing HR of lying, but like it's not always a very authentic look at what the company is like. So I would stress social media and specifically these kind of day in the life of videos.
Mm.
Those time and time again, Gen Z tells me that's what they look for. They're going to check out the company's socials. They're going to look as much as they can to find what is the experience like for entry-ish level people early on in their careers. So if you can create a video with a star employee who's joined your organization relatively recently, and this is what the office, my desk looks like, this is what the meetings looks like, this is my boss, hey, they're so cool. Things like that, a 30 to 60-second video will do unlimited more impact than any write-up ever could.
Yeah.
So things like that give them a feel for the culture, the purpose, and just the actual experience. Again, any generation can relate to this.
Yeah.
Watch a short video clip of the actual offices or read a job description and see which one you feel more comfortable and prepared to join after you've done those.
So you brought up a good point, and that I really want to touch base on. So let's talk about big organizations that I call them traditional. So big banks, mining companies, healthcare, companies that have been around for 20, 40, 50, 60 years, and they are being run by boomers still in some cases, or older Gen X's. And they don't have all the things that you just spoke about. Their social media is meh, or they don't have any at all, or the one that they have is very basic. How do those companies, what do those companies need to do to, because the people that are working in those companies are retiring, and those bigger companies, like I'm in tech, I know that in order to attract good talent, we need to be savvy, we need to be unique, we need to be a cool company and do all those things. But those larger organizations, they're not necessarily focusing on that. So what are they going to do as their older generation starts retiring and they need to attract this talent?
Yes. It's a real challenge. And the reality is we have a workplace that spans like 60, 70, 80 years of people joining at different times, right? It's pretty wild. It's almost the first time in the world's history that this is kind of the case.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a challenge. I use the theme in my keynote, let's be prepared to evolve with Gen Z. So it's not a they're right, it's not a they're right, pick your generation. It's let's evolve together because
Is it like, let's get rid of the cubicles?
that I mean that one's interesting. Cubicles is one where some people appreciate that as compared to the more office, the open concept where we just have distractions everywhere. I think more so it'd be embrace hybrid. In terms of office settings,
Yeah.
Gen Z is they actually, this is again a misconception. Gen Z does see the value of an in-office experience. That's where they're going to create friendships. That's where they're going to get mentorships. That's where they're just going to learn more by not just having big firsthand experiences, but also experiences around them. It's actually statistically much more us, the Gen X and millennials. We're like, you know what? We got our good office life experience. We're good. We've checked that box. So that's kind of an interesting one there. You mentioned social media. Like, I get back to authenticity. You don't even have to have, in terms of recruiting, you don't even have to have a social media channel to create a little video. Gen Z
Yeah.
doesn't like, and I think we all kind of reflect, if we really reflect on it, we all kind of go this way too. Those corporate, really polished, you bring in a whole film crew, everything is edited beautifully. Again, the reality is that actually feels somewhat inauthentic.
Yeah.
And if not inauthentic, at least generic, right? I mean, you can go to any corporate website and stock images and like, oh, it's a meeting room. Wow, cool. Uh, versus even baby boomer, not as comfortable. Grab your phone, put your video on, talk into it, and speak a little bit about what the job's all about, why you're excited to be bringing someone into your organization. I think that's a real opportunity. So being willing to evolve, get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And then I would really stress there is a lot for these for all generations to share with Gen Z,
Yeah.
but we have to create positive environments for them to be receptive to that. There's been so much negativity. This is part of the reason I felt like I wanted to start speaking to this. I'm like, come on, we just finished blaming millennials for all our problems at our companies like 5 years ago. No, all these articles, we swapped out millennial with Gen Z and we published those exact same articles.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of negativity around them, but almost to a T in terms of, as I mentioned, I've interviewed quite a few Gen Zs on my podcast. They almost always say the thing that made the biggest difference was I had a mentor who took an interest in me, who believed in me, who helped kind of outline what I could achieve at this organization. And that just made such an impact. And that in turn allows them to be more receptive to learn from other people who have that experience in the industry. So yes, mentorships play a big role, but creating an atmosphere where we are doing our best to make sure there's a culture of welcoming to our new entrants, not a culture of, oh, they're so annoying. Here's a list of grievances. Like they'll
Yeah.
pick up on that, and that will absolutely shut them down from wanting to learn from anyone else.
Okay. Got it. I understand.
And it's all this is human nature in many
Yeah.
ways, I feel.
And I think that probably like every generation coming into the workforce, the previous generation has struggled. I mean, we're only seeing like the boomers and Nexus and millennials and now Gen Z, but I'm sure this has been happening for many, many, many years.
Try like centuries, perhaps millennia. Like there's kids these days style quotes from Socrates.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the new generation is always kind of the downfall and withering of society. I think all of our listeners can probably relate to that being said about them when they entered the workforce.
I do think that technology has definitely changed the game. I mean, millennials were like that first generation, I call them the Facebook generation, right? Even though
Mhm.
I had Facebook, but they were the first ones to sort of start there. But Gen Z has taken it to a whole different level. And I mean, even a lot of Gen Zs have made a career from technology where they're influencers and they don't want to go work in a traditional 9 to 5 job. So it's definitely changed because of technology. So
Yeah.
you emphasize on two-way communication in your approach. Can you explain how this communication style aligns with Gen Z's expectations, and how can it be implemented effectively in a small to mid-sized company?
Yes, it's a terrific question. And one, I feel passionately about all this, but I really feel passionately about this one. Um, so first of all, I found this stat shocking, but then again, I was probably guilty of it from time to time in my own company, which is that only roughly 50% of companies have channels for employees to share feedback. with the higher ups at an org. So that's kind of shocking, right? Like 1 out of 2, maybe you don't even have a way to talk like to the higher ups. So that's a real problem. But secondly, a lot of companies who are collecting that kind of information, they just sort of take it, and you never know whatever happens to that information. And I use this example in my talk. I think many of us, especially those of us who felt like, man, there's some potential here, but there's some real roadblocks. We get this corporate survey, right? And we just bare our soul, like sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, feedback, filling it out, spending time after hours to do this thing. And then 6 months goes by, and a year goes by, and we have no idea. Did they ever even read that? And then next year's come around, check, 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 but don't care. And then you're starting to disengage. So making sure to share what we're doing with your feedback, not just what we've implemented, but if there's a reason, if there's something we couldn't or didn't implement, but there's a reason behind it, share that too. Just share, make sure you're communicating what's going on. Now, on a more tactical level, if you are a leader of an org, you mentioned small businesses, right? All hands meetings, like just get the team together once a week, once every few weeks. I do like to have, Google traditionally has used sort of the 30-30 model, 30 minutes of sharing the vision, sharing the updates, 30 minutes of taking questions from an audience, just being transparent in that way. I like a tool called Slido. It's an audience participation tool. It allows people to ask questions digitally. They can ask them anonymously, which at a small organization, Sonia, as you know, there can be some tough questions that need to be asked that who's gonna risk their career to ask this question. Sometimes anonymous can actually be useful so that you can get some of those ideas out there. I also like, and again, this depends a little bit on the size of the org, but Slido has an upvoting feature. So people can see other questions that have been submitted. And you can do this during the meeting, or you could do this before the meeting, so you have a little bit of time to prepare if you are the leader. But you can upvote other people's questions. So that way you know it's the best questions or the most agreed upon questions, not just whoever is most comfortable speaking up at a meeting. So and then of course there's such a bevy of like more like managerial direct report situations. There's such a bevy of tools to communicate. I like to encourage people, again, a little bit of an oversimplification, but take maybe you were planning on doing an hourly sync every Wednesday. Can we like chop that up into a 10-minute sync every day? You know, that's that high touch spirit, and it can be a little annoying. That's why I try to help people bake it into their schedules a little bit. But again, that's what Gen Z is more used to. But trying to be not micromanagery, this is a delicate balance. Trying to be like, how can I help you achieve what you're working on? Is there any roadblocks I can help remove? Are there any things you want to just align on real quick? That gives them that sense of comfort that they're not going to spend a month working on something they thought they knew what was going on and then have it be wrong and face a lot of negative ramifications there.
Okay. So how should entrepreneurs adjust their leadership styles to resonate with, motivate Gen Z employees? Can you expand on the lead with why and its importance for this generation?
Yes. I think there's a tendency, again, I'm definitely guilty of it, to where we have our vision, we're just trying to keep everyone moving forward. We're trying to just have people do their jobs. A lot of times we're struggling in our own right in one way or another, and a million things going on. And so it can just be like, just do what I'm saying. Just do your job. I don't have time to worry about these externalities. But it's, as leaders especially, it's really critical, like I said, to have those channels where we're able to communicate and to be really, I like the metaphor, we're sticking with social media, the idea of an influencer. There's a lot to unpack with an influencer. We don't have the same relationships with our favorite YouTube channel people as we do to someone who's reading the news on a traditional platform. broadcast TV. But
Mhm.
why is that? Because fundamentally, most of the experience is the same. You're watching content in a relatively passive way. And so I would really emphasize active versus passive. And this is the challenge to leaders. People really resonate with these influencers because they feel like they're part of the experience. They can like, they can share, they can provide comments, they get updates when people have an idea. They get real quick touch points too. Like they just get little quick train of thought videos. They get the really prepared ones, but they also get smaller clips along the way. That's fun. That makes you feel like you're part of something. And so that's kind of my challenge to you, to entrepreneurs, to leaders. Like, how can you model your company more like you're an influencer who's trying to get everyone to really feel like they're part of this experience, rather than just sort of a, if I'm watching the nightly news, I don't have any effect on that situation at all. I feel very detached as a viewer, and so that's the dynamic we're trying to take a look at. How was that too okay for you, Sonia?
Good. I have a before we run out of time, I have a question that I just thought about right now. So I'm sure you remember this back in the day when millennials started going into the workforce, companies like Google and Amazon and all the big players started completely changing their atmosphere. So Google went off and they had sleeping pods and they had in-house laundry mats and food being delivered to the office every day, and it became about your workspace being sort of like your home space as well, but it was a place where you could take naps so you could work longer and things like that. With Gen Z, do those things matter? And if they don't, what is an atmosphere that a company could sort of create to adapt to the Gen?
I'll say yes, those things matter, and or maybe an asterisk. Um, Gen Z still, all generations still appreciate some of these perks, right? It's nice to get a free meal. It's nice to, have a nice atmosphere to spend time in. But I think increasingly millennials started, millennials perhaps fell for these traps, and Gen Z is pretty conscious of that. A lot of these were, and I use traps a little aggressively perhaps, but like a lot of these were intended to get people to stay at the office longer, as you mentioned, and to work more hours.
Yeah.
And so Gen Z's just very sober about the realities, and that they were growing up when the Great Recession of 2008-ish happened. They were just about to enter the workforce when the pandemic happened. In many sectors like tech, there have been mass layoffs in the last few years as well. Like they've seen in just a span of 15 years, people who've had jobs at places for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years just disappeared overnight. So they're pretty conscious of not falling into the trap of just like, oh, it's got a ping pong table and a Slurpee machine, which I'm in favor of both of those. That's going to be enough to keep me here. So I would emphasize, and it's kind of good news for entrepreneurs because this costs a lot less, flexibility in working arrangements. Gen Z highly, highly values work-life balance. I've had people from every generation say, I really admire them. They are actually changing the workplace for the better by putting an increased emphasis on work-life balance. So what that means, flexibility, maybe we have we're getting away from requiring this kind of traditional 8 to 5, 9 to 6 kind of situation. Maybe if they're more of an evening worker, allow them to have that opportunity. The surveys pretty clearly show hybrid work is the top preference. I appreciate not all industries can offer that, but that's what they like. Gen Z does see the value with friendships, mentorships in office, but they also, of course, see the value of being able to work home and not commute and not have to pay for dry cleaning, not to pay for all the associated travel fees. And so I think flexibility is the top thing to attract people to an office, or I shouldn't say to an office, to an organization, because I just want to emphasize, they went through high school, college, maybe their first jobs like in the pandemic.
Yeah.
They know how to do things remotely. Doesn't mean that all of them like to do that. Like some of them do still very much want to be in the office often, but they're pretty self-aware of how they best work in those environments, whether it was going to live classes or maybe it was way better for their schedule to work a job and to tune into their lectures on demand, which in many cases was an option to them. So they're aware of those things. And so that's one of the things I would stress. Like, yes, I appreciate culture, and some people have the feeling that culture is built best in the office. Maybe so, maybe not. In any case, people who don't want to be in the office 5 days a week, that's going to be a huge thing, and that's going to have a lot of turnover with your culture in any case if you try to implement this return to office kind of situation.
Okay, that was a lot. I feel like that was a lot. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to think about now. Um, Thanks for joining. That was a really good conversation, and it just gives so much context to companies that are going to be bringing in this type of generation. I think it's really important to think about if you are an organization that needs growth. There is nothing worse than someone leaving and losing all of that knowledge base and having to ramp someone new up. It always has an effect on the business, whether people like it or not. So it's always easier to try and keep someone who already knows the business, who knows the work, versus letting them go and having to hire someone new. So this is good to know. I think I what I got a lot of our conversation is communication, um, management styles, environment, flexibility. All those things are really important. So before we end our conversation, is there anything that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, well, first I'll supplement your last note there and just like some actual stats to back it up. Um, my research showed that for every time someone leaves, it costs your company the equivalent of 9 months of their salary. So yeah, it's not just touchy feely. Like that's some real cost. I've actually heard that number in other talks be cited as high as 2x their salary. So yeah, we're talking major
Yeah.
disruptions here. Um, Again, I'll just come back to this spirit of being open to evolving with Gen Z. Gen Z is the future of the workforce. As we've discussed today, there's a lot of really interesting, likable things about what they're trying to do. I really emphasize like getting back to it's not just about shareholders. Like, what's the purpose of what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
This is the most diverse generation ever. They are huge believers in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. They are really trying to champion sustainability and improving the climate, partially so they have a hospitable planet to live on toward the latter stages of their lives. So yeah, here try to. I just I'll just end with this. Like, I really encourage all my audiences and our listeners here today, be open to embracing the spirit that different does not necessarily equal bad. I feel like so many times we just have systems and processes, and it's really annoying when someone just doesn't fit neatly into that box there. But if we're open to evolving with them, I think there could be just so much potential, and it'll just set our organizations and our future leaders, and we'll just go even higher level, our society, our world, for future success.
Yeah, no, I agree. If for anyone who wants to find you, reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yes, pretty easy. So LinkedIn and my personal website. If you go to LinkedIn, it'll be there too. My name is Luke, and then Getting Goetting. I'm sure we'll throw that in the show notes. So I'm usually pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, and my website is literally lukegetting.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Luke. I appreciate your time today, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a terrific experience. Enjoyed the conversation.
I want to extend a thank you to Luke for joining us today and sharing his expertise on the future of work and how we can better engage with Gen Z talent. It's clear that understanding and adapting to the needs of the next generation is crucial for any business aiming to thrive in a rapidly changing world. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.